Okay, we'll be giving a shir today on Siman Kuf Tzadik Daled on two topics that are connected to Siman Kuf Tzadik Daled, but what I think are more practical, two practical elements of Kuf Tzadik Daled, one more than the other. And then the next shir is going to be on Kuf Tzadik Hey. Kuf Tzadik Daled discusses mainly the dinam of buying, selling karka, land to a goy, and the tour begins by saying that a goy who sells land to a yid, the yid is only kaina with a shtar, and it's not enough by payment, and therefore if the yid gives money and the goy didn't write a shtar yet, then the land is hefker because the guy already released ownership from it and the Jew was not kaina it yet, and therefore if somebody else went and grabbed it, he was zeicher in the land. And the tour right away continues. This is only in b'mokim she'ein mishpat yadua lamelech, when there's no defined law of the king. Aval im dina melech u'mishpat she'yizke bekarka mishanais and dama, but if there's a law of the king that whoever pays money is zeicher in the karka even without a shtar, oisen kefi mishpat hamelech, you go according to the law of the king, shekol dinei hamelech b'momoin donim al piyam, because every single rule that comes from the king, when it's relevant to money, we follow what the king says. Pretty broad statement that in anything which is financial, we follow Dינא Dmlchutא. So that's what seems like from the Torah over here. The Beis Yosef brings that the source of this din is from the Gemara in Perek Cheskes Abatim Daf Nun Daled. Over there, Abaye brings in the name of Shmuel regarding Dינא Dmlchutא Dina, but over there, just points out, the Gemara over there mentions that the Melech decided that you cannot buy a karka unless it's with a shtar, and therefore Dינא Dmlchutא Dina, you go based on a shtar. So here we have the Beis Yosef says the source of the Torah is that if the king makes a rule that you buy by money, you purchase by money without a shtar, but the Gemara says if the king makes a rule that you purchase by shtar, you go by a shtar, and and that's what counts. The Bach right away asks and says, I don't understand how this works out, the lashon of the Torah, because the Torah, the Rif and the Rosh, they just copy the lashon of the Gemara. That Dינא Dmlchutא, if a king says to buy with a shtar, you buy with a shtar. They don't mention b'chlal the word money. What happens if the king says that it's enough to buy with money without a shtar? The Rambam combines the two together in Hilchos Schia Perek Aleph Halachot Tesvav. He says, Misha Kosev b'shtar oya noisen damim v'kayetze b'zeh. He brings the halacha from the Gemara, and he says if the law of the king is that you buy by cash or by a shtar, we follow, or whichever other way the king determines, we follow Dינא Dmlchutא. So the Bach says, why did the Torah change the lashon? Why did the Torah say money, doesn't mention the word shtar b'chlal? At least you want to follow the Gemara, mention shtar. You want to add an element of money, copy the lashon of the Rambam. Why do you only mention money? And he says that the Torah is telling you a chiddush over here. Not only if it comes to a shtar, it's obvious that if the king says you have to buy with a shtar, that the king is done with a shtar, because even when the king doesn't say it, the halacha is that you only buy with a shtar. So he's trying to tell you a chiddush specifically when it comes to money, that if the Dינא Dmlchutא is that you buy with money and you don't need a shtar, and one went and did a chazakah on a field, and chazakah we know is stronger than a shtar. In the levels of kinyan, chazakah is stronger than a shtar. Still, in such a place, your chazakah is not going to have any effect because the king said that the purchase is done by money, and therefore if you paid money, whoever paid money was zeicher. Halachas kama v'kama, if whoever writes it, if the place is Dינא Dmlchutã to write with a shtar. But if the Dינא Dmlchutã is to write with money, then any other form of kinyan that somebody else will do, which is usually stronger than money, even stronger than shtar, like chazakah, still you will not be koine in a place where, rather who is going to be koine, the person who gives the cash. This is brought also in the Mechaber. The Mechaber brings it in Sif Beis. He brings it to Lashon, but not like the Tur, rather like the Rambam. That's if the Dinah Dmlchutah is shekosav b'shtar, oy hanois and damim v'kayotze b'dvarim elu. Whichever way the king determines that is the way to transfer land, that is the way that the land is transferred when a Yid buys from a Goy. Now, where does this Dinah Dmlchutah come from? You look, it comes from the Gemara, right? Which we mentioned before about Shmuel saying, Abaye in the name of Shmuel, that if the king said that you buy a field with a shtar, then you buy it with a shtar, and that's Dinah Dmlchutah. That's Dinah Dmlchutah Dinah. The Beis Yosef brings it, and the Beis Yosef also brings the Rashbam. The Rashbam explains the reason for Dinah Dmlchutah, and the Rashbam says this is the Rashbam over there, which the Beis Yosef brings, says. Why is it so? Shekol bnei hamalchus mekablim aleim mirtzoinam chukei hamelech u'mishpat of the people of the land willingly accept the laws of the king and his rules. V'hilkach din gamurhu, and therefore Dinah Dmlchutah is a complete law. Which means what gives the power to Dinah Dmlchutah, what makes something Dinah Dmlchutah, laws of the king that the people accepted from their own will, that they want this king to give these rules. And therefore, because the Yidden accepted the rules of the king, therefore it became, Dinah Dmlchutah became Dinah. But otherwise it would not be Dinah Dmlchutah Dinah if they do not accept it. Paying taxes is accepting the rules of taxes. Running red lights means you're not accepting the laws, if that's the Dinah Dmlchutah. The Ran says in the Ran, this is the basic Rishonim which have an argument on what Dinah Dmlchutah. The Ran in the Dorim, Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph, says in the name of Taisvis that Dinah Dmlchutah only applies to a Goy, a king who is a Goy, but not in Eretz Yisrael. Why is that? Because the king owns the land. Tells the people who live in the land, if you don't follow what I'm telling you, I'm going to throw you out of the country. But a Jewish king cannot do that. Why? Because in Eretz Yisrael everybody has ownership. And the Jewish king cannot throw somebody out of Eretz Yisrael. Mashenk in the Goyish land, the Goy owns the land, and he could throw it anyway. He could throw the guy out whenever he wants. So therefore, Dinah Dmlchutah Dinah. Which means that the Dinah Dmlchutah Dinah has nothing to do with the people accepting the law of the king or not. Dinah Dmlchutah Dinah is because the king owns the land and he does in the land whatever he wants and he could throw you out. Therefore, you have to follow the Dinah Dmlchutah because of the fear that you're going to find yourself without a country, without a house, you're stateless. Which means that if you have a law of the king that you're not happy with, still, Dinah Dmlchutah Dinah, you still have to follow it. If the king could throw you out of the country. Chasam Sofer in a Tshuva, Mispat סימן Daled, says the Ran and the Rashbam don't really disagree on so much. It seems like it's two opposite views. The Rashbam says Dinah Dmlchutah is what you willingly accept upon yourself. The Ran says Dinah Dmlchutah only applies to a Goyish king and only in Goyish lands because a guy could throw you out. He says it's not such a big machlokes. If it's talking about a king is a Yid, that's Yisrael, and he makes laws that are l'toivas b'nei hamedina for the benefit of the people of the land. The Rashbam will agree. The Rashbam obviously says that it works. According to the Ran, it will also work. It's still considered in the Dmlchutah, even though you can't throw you out of the country. Elamai. The Ran is talking about specific scenarios when there's a Dinah Dmlchutah which is done against the will of the people. Those Dinah D'Malchusas, that's when the Ran says, hey, if it's a Yiddish king, that you only have to follow Dinah D'Malchusa when the alternative is that you might get thrown out of the country. But if that's not the alternative, then he doesn't have the ownership of the land, then there is no, that's according to the land, there's no Dinah D'Malchusa. The Chasam Sofer continues another very important element. Dinah D'Malchusa cannot uproot halacha, din tereseinu akdaisha. And therefore, the Chasam Sofer says a rule that any Dinah D'Malchusa, which is not in contradiction to halacha, to what it says in Torah, we say Dinah D'Malchusa Dinah. Even if it's not something that you like, whatever it is. As long as there's nothing in Shulchan Aruch and no halacha which contradicts it, you say Dinah D'Malchusa Dinah. There is a Ramah which seems to imply fakert, that even if it goes against Torah, we still follow Dinah D'Malchusa Dinah. At least that's how the Shach understood the Ramah. There's a Ramah in Siman Shin Samachtes Sif Yud Aleph. A man married a woman in a place where, a man married a woman, and in this country, the way it works is that certain thing in this specific country, that issues of Yerushas must be dealt by the courts. So this woman passed away, and her relatives say, we want to go to court. We don't want to go to Beis Din. Why? When you married this woman in this country, you married her al das, that the only way to deal with marital issues is in court. That's how it is. That's the D'Malchusa. And therefore, we want to go now to court and deal with the Yerusha. Because that's the only way that the family of the woman is going to get the money. Otherwise, up here, the man is Yerush a woman.
Wait, that's the way, then they can only be married in that country.
What?
If that's the case, they can only be married in that country.
What do you mean? No, they're married al das that. No, they can be married anywhere, but al das and that when they're in the country, that's what they have to do. The Ramah adds,
Is that valid?
The what?
Is it valid?
No. The Ramah adds that no, this Dinah D'Malchusa is only bedavar sheyesh boi hano lemelech. Dinah D'Malchusa only applies when something which the king himself benefits from it, or sheyesh boi toiva l'takonas bnei hamedina, or something which is for the benefit of the people of the land. But to make a law that you must go to court, that you cannot do. That means the laws of the king, to follow the laws of the king, that you always have to do. If the law of the king is that you have to go and accept somebody else's ideas on yourself, the courts, that not. So the Shach understood it in Siman Ayin Gimel Sifkot Lametes, that the Shach in Siman Ayin Gimel, he understands it as follows. That according to the Ramah, anything Dinah D'Malchusa, which is a clear Dinah D'Malchusa, even if it's against Torah, you have to follow. Elamai, if it's the only exception is to send, the king cannot force you to go to court. That's such a Dinah D'Malchusa you don't have to listen to, but a regular Dinah D'Malchusa, even if it's against Torah, you have to listen to. And the Shach writes in it over there, Yisrael. How can you say such a thing that Dinah D'Malchusa could uproot Torah? That's exactly what we're talking about over here. If you have to follow it, even if it's in contradiction to Torah. And he says, not only does this apply in this, because and he brings us two opinions. There's a machlokes when Dinah D'Malchusa applies, right? Not what's the reason Dinah D'Malchusa. When Dinah D'Malchusa applies. Some say Dinah D'Malchusa is only l'tevas hamelech or l'tevas bnei hamedina. But ben adam l'chaveira, you don't have to follow Dinah D'Malchusa. And there are others that say even ben adam l'chaveira you have to follow Dinah D'Malchusa. The Shach says, according to both opinions, even those that say that it's things that Ben Adam L'Chaverei, you have to follow Dinah D'Malchusah, Hainu dafka ma she'enoi neged din tereseinu, elo she'enoi mefurash etzleinu. It's only when something is not against what it says clearly in Torah, something which is not clearly written in halacha. So then you could say Dinah D'Malchusah Dinah. But anything which is directly contradicting something which is paskin in halacha, you're not allowed to follow Dinah D'Malchusah. This machlekes that the Shach mentions, whether you follow Dinah D'Malchusah Dinah only on things that are relevant to the king and to the benefit of the people, or also in disputes between people, is you have, for example, one of the shittas that the Marik in Sheresh Kuf Pei Zayin holds that Dinah D'Malchusah doesn't apply b'chlal ben Adam L'Chaverei. Only l'tevas HaMelech or l'tevas b'nei Medina, and you could say that Ramah holds the same way, because the Ramah in Siman Shin Samach Tes says that it's Davar Sheish Bein L'Melech L'Shul L'Takanas B'nei Medina, but not Bein Adam L'Chaverei. So you could be medayik from the Ramah that way. But the fact that the Ramah had to, and if you are medayik that way in the Ramah, then you solve the problem of the Shach, because the Ramah is talking about, but maybe b'chal Bein Adam L'Chaverei you don't have to follow Dinah D'Malchusah. And therefore, how can you go to court, even if there's a law Bein Adam L'Chaverei, but to go to court, you don't have to follow it. But then you still have a problem. What happens if the law that you have to go to court is l'tevas b'nei Medina? So there shouldn't be fights. Maybe you should follow it, even according to the Ramah. So that's why we still have the question: if Dinah D'Malchusah Dinah applies, that's we still have the problem of the Shach. That Dinah D'Malchusah Dinah in a place, even in a place where it's against Dinah Tereseinu Akdesha, even if it's a Tevas B'nei Medina, it still would be a problem. Now,
What happens if it's a
say it only over Yidden, we'll get to it soon.
If it's a place where they say it on the Yidden, and the only way to say the Yidden is to do Yidden.
You ask a Shalas Chacham when that happens. I don't know. I don't really know what's to do with these kinds of things. The Marsham in Tshuvas Chedekav Siman Kuf Chafei says we don't say Dinah D'Malchusah on anything which is B'nei L'Chaverei, only things which are l'tevas HaMedina or l'tevas HaMelech, and even if it's not against Dinah Torah, Dinah Tereseinu Akdesha, you still don't have to follow Ben Adam L'Chaverei in Dinah D'Malchusah. Yeah, the others will disagree with it. We'll get to it in a second. Well, so let's just summarize the three main machlekes regarding Dinah D'Malchusah Dinah. First of all, a machlekes, not a halacha machlekes, but a reason machlekes. Why do we accept Dinah D'Malchusah? Why is there Dinah D'Malchusah Dinah? Is it because the people accepted it, or is it because the king has power over you? Second thing, is it only for things that are for the benefit of the king or benefit of Bnei Medina, or it's also Ben Adam L'Chaverei? And the third thing is, if it's, does it apply even if it's against Dinei Tereseinu Hakdosha?
The reasoning of the Ran applied to a place like America?
Huh?
The reasoning of the Ran applied to a place like America?
No, you can't get thrown out unless you're an illegal immigrant. Then you get thrown out of the country. Not because they own the country, but because they own the border. They're supposed to control the borders.
Yeah, it's not like a place where there's no.
There is no melech. There is no melech. He can't kill you and he can't throw you out of the country if you're an American.
I don't think it's any country like that. Maybe in Africa.
Russia. Russia could throw you out of the country. Could kill you. Well, nothing's going to happen over there. Maybe it's not officially a king, but it's pretty close to it. There's an interesting Rabbeinu Yoina on the same Gemara in Cheskes Avatim and Eliezer ben Yaina, where he says that Dinah Dmlchutha Dinah is limited only to be mafkia moment, mafkia things. That means Dinah Dmlchutha Dinah is only enough to remove somebody's ownership from something, not to give ownership to somebody else. Which means a king could take something away from you, but a king cannot go and give that to somebody else. So if Dinah Dmlchutha is to take something away from a Yid, you could discuss Dinah Dmlchutha if that works or not. But if Dinah Dmlchutha to take something from one Yid and give it to another Yid, that doesn't work. It's interesting, Dinah Dmlchutha. And Elamai, Rabbi Yehuda says, so if so, why kinyanim according to Dinah Dmlchutha works? That means if according to Dinah Dmlchutha, shtat is enough for a kinyan to transfer something, why does it work? L'chayra, Dinah Dmlchutha should not work to transfer ownership. Transfer ownership, we have to follow Torah. So he says, situmta, maybe mitzat situmta. There's an Even Ha'ezel, in the Rambam, Niski Moment, Perek Ches, Halacha Hey. He explains this idea a little bit more, and he says, what's the whole idea of kinyanim? Kinyanim is a way of commerce between people. There's things that we are noyig, I should buy something from you, you should buy something from me. Normal operating way of this world. So, this is what's, in every country, there's their own ways of, every country, every industry has their own ways of running the commerce. How to have a normal commercial operating economy. So therefore, every kinyan is dependent on minhag, is dependent on nagu, is dependent on what's common in that place. And therefore, being that the Yidden who live in this country, because they live here, they're operating to be able to survive, they have to operate according to the normal ways of buying and selling things. So therefore, they are noihig like the Dinah Dmlchutha. So therefore, even though al pi Torah you could argue that certain kinyanim should not be enough to remove ownership from one and give it to somebody else, because nahagu already to follow this kinyan to do these things, so it's already, that makes a Dinah Dmlchutha. It's not when it comes to kinyanim. Even according to Rabbi, he's basically explaining the idea of Rabbi Yehuda. That Dinah Dmlchutha, it's not, Dinah Dmlchutha doesn't have the power to be mafkia something, to give ownership of something taken from one Jew to give it to another Jew. But Dinah Dmlchutha, if Bnei Yisrael started being noyeg to do the kinyanim in this way, then it works. It's not mitzat situmta, it's not nagu, which is similar to situmta. It's similar to situmta, and therefore the kinyan works. So now, what comes out of it? If it's mitzad nahagu, then we have a rule that minhag is aikar halacha. So if nahagu, according to Dinah Dmlchutha, and Dinah Dmlchutha is against Dinah Tereseina Akdesha, then l'cha'ira it should work. Yeah. Where do we see it work in kinyanim? If you say that kinyanim is medin nahagu, then you don't have to get into a discussion of Dinah Dmlchutha is against halacha, because the nahagu makes it that is the halacha. But if we don't say that the inyan of kinyanim is mitzad nahagu, which makes it into a situmta, then you have a problem according to those that hold that Dinah Dmlchutha should not apply if it's against Torah. According to Torah, transfer of ownership doesn't occur with this method, then how can you follow Dinah Dmlchutha to do it? So it's much easier to just take this approach that it's mitzad nahagu. This is also explained in the book Nahar Afar Siman, Mishpat Siman Yutes, and there's a book Divrei Emes, Siman Yud Beis. They also explain this, that when it comes to kinyanim, mitzad nahagu and minhag is aikar halacha. And the Divrei Emes proves it from a tshuva of the Rashba, Miyuchasas l'Ramban Siman Chav Beis, that if, and he proves from the Rashba that if the king makes the rules of commerce, how to transfer something from somebody to from one person to another person, even if it's against Torah, even if it's from yid to yid, two yidden buying, selling property to each other, buying or selling a product to each other, and the kinyan that according to law is a kinyan which works is not a kinyan which works off Torah, they must follow it. Why? Because kach nahagu, and the king established these laws for the purpose of preventing fights, and that's why everybody's noyig to do it. And once it became a minig, the minig uproots the halacha regarding this. And the Divrei Emes proves the same thing from the Rivosh also. Now, now there's an interesting Rashba, two chuvas of the Rashba, one in Chelik Gimel Siman Kuf Tes, one in Chelik Vav Siman Kuf Mem Tes, that Dinah Dmlchutא applies to laws that the king himself made, not in laws that the king couldn't care less about. Which means, if the king says that you have to go to Erkois, and let the Erkois make a decision, that the psak of the Erkois doesn't become Dinah Dmlchutא Dinah. Why? Dinah Dmlchutã Dinah means a law that the king did. A king established the law. It was codified into law by the king. But if the king says that you have to go to court, that's not Dinah Dmlchutã. It's not even in the category of Dinah Dmlchutã. And what the court rules, not Dinah Dmlchutã. The king doesn't care what the court rules. The king says, "This is how I want you to solve fights." They solve fights in a different way. He says it's not Dinah Dmlchutã. It's Dinah Goyim. Not Dinah Dmlchutã. Dinah Dmlchutã. So the king is the one that makes it. Same ideas in the Rivosh and Siman Reish Chav Ches and the Marashdam Choshen Mishpat Siman Reish Chav Daled. So Dinah Dmlchutã, according to these opinions, Bechal wouldn't apply in America. Yeah, not mitzad that they can. According to the Ran, you can't throw you out of the country. According to even if you want to follow the Rashbam, it's because you accepted it upon yourself. It's not mitzad Dinah Dmlchutã. It's not the din of the Melech. There is no Melech. It's not a din of the Melech. And it's dinim which were established by local governments, state governments, whatever governments. Soon we can see what Alter Rebbe says about it. Different governments that are there, and they were. It's not because a king decided that they should establish the laws. It's whatever they sat together, sat in the Fabring, and they made a decision. That's how we're going to do it. Or they sat in court and made a decision as they're going to do. It doesn't make it in the Dmlchutã. It's Stam Dinah Goyim. Unless, now, and that also takes off the Tzlateva, who say that Dinah Dmlchutã, according to the Ramah, is the Tevas Bnei Medina, the Tevas HaMelech. The Tevas HaMelech is out of the picture, because he's no longer, there's no Melech. The Tevas Bnei Medina, you could say the Tevas Bnei Medina, according to the Ramah, it's a Dinah Tevas Bnei Medina, but who made the law? Still doesn't make it Dinah Dmlchutã. It's Dinah HaGoyim, the Tevas Bnei Medina. It doesn't have the power of Dinah Dmlchutã. So we have to roll back to Nagu. If it's, it is Tevas Bnei Medina, but there's no king. It's not Dinah Dmlchutã. It's not the gather of Dinah Dmlchutã because there's no Melech. Dinah Dmlchutã means the law of the king. There's no king, there's no law. Dinah HaGoyim is not Dinah Dmlchutã. That's what the Rashba explains. And the Rivosh.
According to the Rashbam, they said that it's the Bnei Medina
Mekal upon themselves these laws.
What does that mean? In other words, does that mean it's mitzvah the koyach of the Melech?
So, see this,
So people that live in America, they're giving themselves over to the law.
They're not giving themselves over. They're mekabel at these laws. They're mekabel to follow these laws. So then it becomes a minhag.
The Rashbam, you're saying it has to be applied also to a Melech?
Yeah, he explains it about a melech. Explains it about a melech.
In Kabbalah, the America, everyone is in Kabbalah to do the laws.
No. There wouldn't be so many people in jail if everybody would be mekabel to follow the laws. A lot of people do, but not everybody.
Yeah, officially, when a person comes to America, it's what they do.
Okay, you're supposed to.
So officially,
But what if you're born here? You don't have to mekabel it, no? You mekabel it by birth. What makes a person mekabel Dinah Dmlchutã in America? I think what's the The fact that you act upon it, most people want to act in the civil society, they follow the law, so it's mitzad minhag. Nagu is stronger than Dinah Mechusah. Nagu is much stronger than Dinah Mechusah. Because Dinah Mechusah is a machlekes if it could go against halacha. Nagu is for sure, if it's a minhag that everybody's naig, or most people are naig, it's already uproots the halacha if it's against, not everything, I'm saying is in certain things. So, the fact is not Dinah Mechusah is better. Now the Alter Rebbe discusses, where does the Alter Rebbe discuss Dinah Mechusah? And Here's Gzelo Gneva. Here's Gzelo Gneva, there's a few Seifim, the Alter Rebbe goes like 8-9 Seifim about a guy who's the moiches, a person who takes the taxes, a chulu. And then the Alter Rebbe, Sif Yudzayin, Yudches, Yutes, and these halachas goes, says over there, if a king goes and cuts down trees from, it's not in the white booklet. If a king goes and cuts down trees, and then, or his workers cut down the trees, and they make a bridge. So you're allowed to go over, you're allowed to have a knife on the bridge. The king didn't pay the people for their wood. He owns the land. He went over to somebody's house and cut down trees he went to somebody's forest, or to 5 Yidden's forest, they own all the trees. He cut down half a forest and built the bridge. So now the Yidden are all, what are we going to do? They have no choice. They're stuck. But you can still have a knife from it, even though it's not considered that it was stolen. King decides. Sif Yudches says the same thing is if a king destroys houses to make a highway. Also, you can enjoy the highway. You don't have to worry about the fact that the Yidden lost their houses over there along the way. Why? Alter Rebbe says like this: Sharei hiskimu alav bnei Yosef haaretz. The people of this land agreed. V'samcho daitom shehu midineim, and they relied on him that he's going to give them. He's going to make the laws. They relied on the king. Shehu, Shu'adineim, yeah, not midna, sorry, Adineim. Shu'adineim, that he is their owner. V'heim avodim loy, and they are his slaves. So they accepted him. Skimu alav, they agreed. Yeah, so there's one part of it. But second thing, some chodaitim, any action they do is on smichus das, is on reliance. So what they named it, he's their own, he's their master. V'heim avodim loy, and they're his slaves. Shim loikein, but if it's not so, king is a gazlan, all his workers are gazlanim. But if otherwise, no, they agreed that because he's the king on them and he's their owner and they're his slaves, so therefore any rule that he makes, they accept it, and therefore they can enjoy what he does. Which means, first of all, they agreed in their minds, not that they have a choice, that he should be the king. They relied on him, some chadaitam, their mind is clear and they understand that they're his slaves. And so if you,
why would they say that?
why semech das? Because they have no other choice. They're forced to rely on it. If you test the Alter Rebbe now says,
They're forced or
they're smichus das. The Nekuda of Sif Ches is a smichus das. The smichus das, that whatever the king does is what the king does, because
but they accepted him as the master.
They accepted him. They have no choice but to accept him, but the people, they accepted him.
Who gives him the right?
They're not rebelling against him.
Who gives him the right? Because he's stronger?
Because he owns the land.
How's he own it? Because he conquered it.
Either he conquered it or he yashin it from his father. I don't know. Somehow he owned it. Because he used to be like that, Used to be like that, yeah. In America, nobody owns anything.
Anywhere, we're in the world anywhere.
No, there's no total ownership in America.
Clouds anywhere.
Even your house, this is not total ownership. There's always a little bit that some other government entity owns, but at the same time, there's like division of powers. Nobody could completely uproot somebody. There's always There's always a few strings connecting other people.
It's not full ownership inside the domain.
Not ownership, what do I mean? If Iran buys a park, a massive plot of land over here, they could put the rockets? They don't own it. They own the rights to the land within a certain framework. It's not full ownership. They can't throw Yidden out of there or whatever they decide. It doesn't work like that.
I mean, that's how people,
Ah?
that's how people like, go off the grid.
They go off the grid, but they don't own the land. See if you test, Alter Rebbe explains that this is only bedover kloli shegozer akol bnei malchusoi, something which the king made a gzeira on all the people of his land. But if he starts discriminating, he only makes these dinah de malchusa for one specific person, or for one specific city, or for one specific country, or whatever it is, then it's not considered dinah de malchusa. And if the king acts upon it, that means if the king makes a new dinah de malchusa, that we're going to build a park on this guy's house because I don't like him. That's not dinah de malchusa, that's a gzeila de malchusa. Why? Kevon she'einoi mashra midaisav, because the king doesn't even out his rules, his laws. Non-discriminatory. To be able to be dinah de malchusa, it's got to be non-discriminatory. Then Alter Rebbe says if the king puts taxes on all the Yidden equally, even though he doesn't put it on the goyim, it's still considered dinah de malchusa. It's equal. Then Alter Rebbe continues more. Even in something which a king does, which is mashra midaisav, which he makes it across the board, dinah de malchusa is only something which has hanoy lamelech, has hanoy. He himself gets enjoyment out of it. Or something which is for the benefit of the whole country. But not something between Ben Adam and Chaveda. So Alter Rebbe first of all paskins over here. Ben Adam and Chaveda, you don't b'chlal, there's no dinah de malchusa. When does dinah de malchusa apply? Only davar shuana lemelech, or something which is tikkun amedina kulo, not Ben Adam and Chaveda. And only if the king is mashra midaisav. And only because you recognize that he owns you and you're a slave. If you don't have all those elements, then not.
Why is all the deal not clear mashra midaisav, but the Yidden is mashra midaisav?
It's all the Yidden across the board, mashra midaisav. To all the people. Which basically, if he picks on one, it's not the Tevas and Medina. Cool. The question is what's considered a kingdom, if a whole state, l'chayra, is considered Medina, full Medina. There's three chuvas of Tzemach Tzedek which have dinim which are relevant to it. I'm just going to point out the nekudas from each one of them, because it's just nekudas that come out of each one of them. First one is the Mispat סימן Beis Sa'if Vav. That's the first one. Over there, the Tzemach Tzedek points out, dinah de malchusa is only regarding only what the king himself rules. Which kind of king? A king that could expropriate land from you, take away land from you by force. Him or his workers, slaves, could take away land from you. And he brings from Alter Rebbe that, and when the whole land is, all the people in the land are his slaves. That is a king which his laws are dinah de malchusa. That's Alter Rebbe says. That he's that the king is their master and they're his slaves.
So,
It doesn't apply to them. But Tzar Ha'ir, but if you have a minister or a governor of a certain section of the country, he's not his constam is considered a hediotis, not considered a melech. Why? Because he himself is an evet to the melech. So he's not the master of the place. He's a representative of the place, of the king. So their laws are not dinah de malchusa unless dinah de malchusa gave them the power to institute, according to Dinah Dmachusah, they got this power to make these determinations. Which means it's not like the Rashba, because the Rashba says that Dinah Dmachusah is only if the king himself says it, not if he tells you to listen to other people. But over here, if the Tzemach Tzedek looks like if the Saro Ir gets power from the Dinah from the king to be able to impose certain laws, then those laws become Dinah Dmachusah. Which means that if a place where there's a king, there could be that laws which are made by a Kohes will become Dinah Dmachusah.
Why?
Why? Because the king gave them the power to make these laws. Because the king, yeah. It says in a place where there's a king, and the king gave them that power. So he says, therefore, if the Saroir, the minister, the governor, has legal power from the king to take land, if you don't pay taxes, to take away your land for whatever reason, then he becomes like a mini melech for that place, and his laws might be Dinah Dmachusah. Why? Because he has the element of being able to take away your land, like a king has the power to take away your land, because that means that he owns the whole thing. If he has the minister, same power. That's in סימן. Government has no power to take away your property against your will unless they pay you for it. Eminent domain,
State or country.
they have no power. Not in America. Eminent domain, they have to pay you. They can't take away without paying you. If you owe taxes, they could take it from you, but that's mitzad the choiv, not mitzad that they have the power to take it without any mitzad bal choiv. I mean, that means that the bank, if you don't pay your mortgage, also becomes a melech. No, just because if you don't pay if you don't pay what you owe, then what you own pays what you owe. And then there's another truth from Tzemach Tzedek, סימן Lamed Zayin. Also, I'm going to point out one nekuda from it. It's Ois Gimel over there is talking about if a Sar Ha'ir has the power to prevent somebody from Asagas Gvul. I actually think this one is either in this year's book or in last year's book. This Chuvas, סימן Lamed Zayin. Over there he says, so basically if the Melech, if the Saroir says that in this city, in this state, only Pliny ben Pliny could sell this product. And Eis Gimel over there, that's a discussion at Chuvin. Eis Gimel, he says, is it mitzad, could it be mitzad Dinah Dmachusah? He says, no, it can't say Dinah Dmachusah. Why? Because this Saroir is only an Eved to the king. Back to the Diuk from Al Terebe, the Heim Avodim. So, only somebody who is not an Eved to somebody else could be Dinah Dmachusah. But he says, but maybe not. Why? Because we have a Smeh. In Choshen Mishpat Siman Shin Samachtes Sifkot Yud Beis. That over there the Smeh explains that a king makes Gzeiris and Dinah Dmachusah in his country because he owns the land, just like a Hedyot, a regular person, does calls his shots in his own land that he owns. From that, the Tzemach Tzedek says maybe if this Saroir owns the land, even though he's an Eved to the Melech, he owns the land, he's like a Hedyot, he could do in his land whatever he wants. So maybe it would work. Maybe it would work. So it's not Mikoyach Dinah Dmachusah, but it's Mikoyach ownership of the land. So he says, it's not Dinah Dmachusah, you can't apply it. Because Dinah Dmachusah will only apply if it's a king who has avodim under him, or the king tells the Eved, his Saroir, who is his Eved, you could make these and these decisions. But he says maybe a Saroir has a power to make certain laws in his city based on the fact that he owns the land of this city or this country. But it doesn't become Dinah Dmachusah. It's like it's similar to Dinah Dmachusah. Or you could say that it's one version of Dinah Dmachusah. Dinah Dmachusah is because he owns the land. Based on the shit of the Ran. The Dinah Dmachusah is because he could throw you out. He said he owns the land? He said, yeah, but why? Yeah, he could throw people out. But then later the Alter Rebbe says it's also because they're avodim. So all the elements, Alter Rebbe brings all the opinions into it and puts all the restrictions on it.
Could be that that's the kind of having enough of it.
Huh?
Could be that later you need to have.
You need to have their agreement for Hana to be able to have Hana from what he takes.
It's not him. I mean, it's not me having enough from the Torah. Has to be that as well.
Can sign. Yeah, it could be that's because of that, yeah.
So the Sar, that means he has the ownership.
If he has ownership, yeah. סימן Peivav is an interesting tshuva from the Tzemach Tzedek. It's a long tshuva. Somebody someone sent to the Tzemach Tzedek a psak of a different Rav. And over there, it's about somebody who somebody found stolen goods of his in somebody else's house. He goes over to him and he tells him, I want it back. He says, I bought it from the Ganav. Yeah, I know it's stolen, but I bought it from the guy who stole it. And I know that there's a famous guy who steals it. And the only part of what was stolen was found by him. So now the Rav says the guy doesn't have enough money to pay back everything. But one of the reasons that the Rav writes to go after him is to be able to force him to say who the Ganav is, or to be able to. And he says, why? Because it's Dina Dmlchutא, really, if stolen goods are found in somebody's house, even if it's not the full stolen goods, in that country, Dina Dmlchutã was, that person who holds the stolen goods has to pay for the whole thing that was stolen. Because that becomes like a raya as if he's the one who stole it. That's one of the things he mentions, this guy in the tshuva. One in the Kudus says, Dina Dmlchutã. So Tzedek goes through the whole tshuva, it's like 10 or 11 ICS, and he takes apart the whole tshuva of this Rav that was sent to him. And where is it? Zayin, Tzemach Tzedek discusses this element of Dina Dmlchutã in short. And he says you can't say Dina Dmlchutã. Why? Because when does Dina Dmlchutã apply, he brings from the Shach and Siman Shin Nun Vav Sifkot and Yud. That Dina Dmlchutã is because Noyagim Kach, we're noyag like this today. What does it mean we're noyag like this today? Tzemach Tzedek explains. Because Rabbi Seinu Ha'achroinim, Chachamenu Ha'achroinim, were mesaken, that we follow Dina Dmlchutã. So therefore, that's what and in certain things, so in these things, we're already noyag to follow Dina Dmlchutã, because that's what the Chachamim were mesaken. Or later, the Achronim were mesaken, that's what we should follow. But it only applies to the things that the Achronim determine that we follow Dina Dmlchutã. But it doesn't apply to this, that we should follow Dina Dmlchutã about something which is not discussed anywhere, that in the Achronim that we follow Dina Dmlchutã on it. Very interesting, Dina Dmlchutã is not a global that every din of the king is accepted. Even if it's not against Torah, even if it's the Tevis HaMelech, no. Things that we have, that we were noyeg already to follow Dina Dmlchutã, because as it been gepasken, generational, that's what Dina Dmlchutã applies to.
It's not like he's going according to the time of Einiyin.
Then it said what? Yeah. But no, that's what makes him a king.
Why would it make a difference what the minhag is?
No, he says in things like this where there's no. He says basically that's what he says. You can't force him to pay everything. So you can't. That's what he mentions. He brings that shach for that.
Would that go in the category of the Helen or it's
Tevis Kolam and Dina also. Not only Ben Adam Chaver.
So Ben Adam Chaver just need two people fighting and then
Yeah, to dispute between them, yeah. Now, a few other interesting points that are Nageya to, I'm going to bring a few interesting things mentioned in the Poskim regarding Dina Dmlchutã. You have a Knesset Agdela, Hagoy Satur Ois Daled. He brings from a Sefer Maaseh Chiyah Siman Chav Beis. The Dinah Dmlchutא applies to anything and everything, as long, even Benadam L'Chaveirei, or the Tevas HaMelech, but even Benadam L'Chaveirei, as long as you don't take from somebody something that al pi dinei Torah he would be Zoichen in Bezdin. That means, if according to Dinah, if according to Dinah Dmlchutא, a Yid, you're going to make somebody pay something or acquire something, that according to halacha, if he would go to Bezdin, he would not have the same psak, he would have an opposite psak, then you cannot follow Dinah Dmlchutã. But anything else which is not so, even Benadam L'Chaveirei, you follow Dinah Dmlchutã. Dinah Dmlchutã will only, even if it's not a pi Torah, Dinah Dmlchutã, Benadam L'Chaveirei, that it doesn't have to be followed, is only to be Moitzi Mamash Leikadin.
That's basically negative.
Neged Torah could be also Bar Metzra and Niskei Shchenim and Hezekas Bichlal, Menias Hezek, and Gramas and Garmiz and all these things. You could have different and when somebody becomes responsible for something, yeah. Next thing over there, the Knesset Agdela continues. This is from the Marashach, Chelik Beis Siman Kuf Yud Zayin. And this that we say that you need a shtar. Yeah, we'll go back to the beginning of this of what we spoke about. This that you say that you need a shtar for a yid to buy from a goy. In a place where al pi dinah Dmlchutã you need a shtar, yeah? Let's say in a place al pi dinah Dmlchutã you need a shtar, because that's what the Gemara says. That's what the Gemara says. A place you need a shtar, we say dinah Dmlchutã. So the Marashach says that only if al pi halacha b'dinenu he would be zoiche in that karka for a different reason, either mitzat kesef or mitzat something else. But if b'dinenu he would have no schus whatsoever to be zoiche in this karka, for whatever reason it is, even not with a kimli, he says, then the fact that there's a shtar, you're not kind with a shtar even in the Dmlchutã. That means Dinah Dmlchutã that you requires a shtar is only if together with it there is something which makes al pi Torah a transfer of ownership. But if al pi Torah there's absolutely no way that you'll be able to transfer it, there's no Dinah Dmlchutã. What example could you think of such a thing? Or something which is intellectual, something which is not tangible. Something which is not tangible is something which is davar shel b'leilam. You can make a shtar, but you're not kainet.
So you're saying that it's the same thing as
So then you're not kainet.
you're saying the same category?
What?
Dmlchutã?
There's no Dinah Dmlchutã.
What?
No Dinah Dmlchutã. No. Davar shel b'leilam is no Dinah Dmlchutã. You can't be kainet even with a shtar, davar shel b'leilam, or Dinah Dmlchutã. Because you can't be kainet al pi Torah either, Dinah Dmlchutã, davar shel b'leilam with a certain davar shel b'leilam even with a shtar. Can't buy something that doesn't exist. Mata Shimon Hagoy Satur Ois Tes. If, very interesting story, short story, if Reuven had land and he didn't pay his mortgage, didn't pay his taxes, whatever it is, and the guy who is the lien holder, who has the shtar chayv, takes it away, takes the karka away, and the bank took it away, and then they went and they sold it to Shimon. The bank sold it to Shimon, the guy sold it to Shimon, and he made with him a contract. Api Dinah Dmlchutã, because that's what a shtar. The guy sold it to Yid with a shtar. So he brings over there from the Bnei Avram Choshen Mishpat Siman Tes that Shimon obviously is koinet, and Reuven has no recourse against him. Reuven can't say, the guy took it away from me, shalei kadin, therefore you bought it from the guy, shalei kadin. No, it doesn't work. The fact that if Reuven took it, if the guy sold it to Shimon, if the guy acquired it, Dinã Dmlchutã, and sold it to Shimon according to Dinã Dmlchutã, then Reuven has no more recourse against him. There's an Erech Shai, Sifkat and Beis over here. He's talking. There's a person who gave a down payment to buy a house, and then two Yidden, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven gave a down payment to buy a house, and then or a field. Then from Shimon, and he got into a fight with Shimon. They were fighting back and forth, and didn't pay him the rest of it, of the money yet. Then they made peace, and Reuven and Shimon, they made a kinyan, sudar, to transfer the land from Reuven to Shimon. But didn't finish paying it. And now, and they said, we're going to write a shtar, we're going to take care of it. It's a place where you have to write a shtar. It's a place, a country where you have to write a shtar. They didn't write a shtar. They didn't write a shtar yet. In the meantime, comes somebody else and bought the field from Reuven. And Reuven sold it to him and gave him a shtar and registered it in the books of the country. And according to Dinã Dmlchutã, you're supposed to, once you register it, when you sell with a shtar, and you write it in the books and records of the place, it becomes yours. So he explains, the Erech Shai explains, that even though there's a whole machlekes if we say Dinã Dmlchutã, Dinã b'nadam l'chaveirei, and or we only say it when it comes to the Tevas HaMelech or the Tevas Bnei Medina. Over here, the Kulei Alma, you cannot do, if the Dinã Dmlchutã is that you acquire land with a shtar, there's no way that somebody else could acquire the land with a different kinyan that's not a shtar. So the first person made a kinyan agav sudar, and there's a whole thing in Zayar, all the things terrible for somebody who goes against the kinyan sudar. The Maisa, because in this country, Dinã Dmlchutã is you could only koina with a shtar. The first person did not acquire it because he didn't have a shtar. Only the second person acquired it. You'll soon see. And he brings it also from the Sefer HaTrumas Sham and Vav. And he says, why is that? The Erech Shai says, why is it that over here, if you write it in the tabu, in the books of records, and you did a shtar, which are the two things that the king wants, Dinã Dmlchutã, then it works. And it works, even though it's b'nadam l'chaveirei. He says, it's not really b'nadam l'chaveirei. It's not b'nadam l'chaveirei.
It's not.
No, it's Tevas HaMelech. Why? The Tevas HaMelech, first of two reasons. First of all, the king takes taxes from each property tax. So it's negate to him to know who's the owner and who owns the land. Second of all,
It's an official
official transaction. And therefore, the second of all, because also registering in the books and records, the king wants to know who's what. So it's like Tevas HaMelech to know who's the real owner. So that's why he wants it registered in the official logbook. And B, that when the karka is sold, it should be done with a shtar. So he makes taxes from the sale, and then he makes taxes afterwards. So in addition to, it's not b'nadam l'chaveirei only. It's Tevas HaMelech. If it's Tevas HaMelech, then there's the Dmlchutã, the Kulei Alma, in such a thing. And therefore, if a shtar is done, if a sale was done without a shtar, then it's as if there was no sale done in this place. Yes, today you can't do anything without a shtar. Yeah, so we spoke about previous year. Now, it's a side thing, like we mentioned in the beginning, there's a machlekes, there's a Yav Deran, that the Dinã Dmlchutã doesn't apply in Eretz Yisrael, and the Chasam Sofer explains doesn't apply in Eretz Yisrael for things that are against that people are not interested, that it's Baal Koracham. The whole machlekes of Dinã Dmlchutã didn't apply in Eretz Yisrael or not. I concluded something interesting, a Sikha Yechidus from the Rebbe, Tovshin Chavtes. A lot of people here already know it. It's in end of Tishrei Tavshin Chavtes, and Teres Menachem, Tavshin Chavtes, Chelik Aleph, page 258, 259. Over there, the Rebbe is talking to Teichik Kfar Chabad, a few of them that were there, and talking about paying taxes. And the Rebbe says, being that people in Kfar Chabad, many of them came from countries where the government was run by Goyim. And they got used to already to the Rebbe uses the word to do dreyerai. Dreyerai. To get away, to avoid paying taxes, to avoid following,
Same with corrupt governments.
No, don't think corrupt governments. To avoid, that's how they lived. To save a few dollars so they could do mitzvahs, so they could be educate their kids. Yes, the Rebbe says. And that's in Eretz Yisrael, the Rebbe says, avoiding paying taxes is gezel harabim. Don't say it's in the Dmlchotא. Gezel harabim, the Rebbe says, Chavtes. Why? Because when they are not paying taxes, they are causing a hefsed to the rest of the Yidden. The needs of the other Yidden are not going to be fulfilled. There's other Yidden in the country who need to get services or whatever it is, and by you not paying, you are causing a hezek to the other people. And therefore, he says, he warns the Bnei Kfar Chabad not to play kunzen, not to pay less than what you're supposed to, not to pay late. And the lashon over there is because not talking about the Maimed Matzav that you had in Russia, and the Rebbe adds, America or England. But America or England. It's not Russia, America or England. Rather, it's talking about a Jew who lives in Israel, which is run by Yidden. And therefore, if you're going to avoid it, you're doing Gezel Harabim. Which is interesting, suddenly now, the Rebbe turned over the whole Dinah Dmlchotã. Dinah Dmlchotã is out the window. Yeah, because there's no melech. Technically, there's no melech, no avodim, nothing. Therefore, the whole discussion whether it applies in Eretz Yisrael or not is moot. It's fakert. The Rebbe goes from a different angle. Don't look at the Dinah Dmlchotã. It's not America, it's not England, it's not Russia. In Israel, it's run by Yidden. And when you are not paying taxes or paying late or whatever it is, you're stealing from other Yidden.
It never looks at it as like one giant Jewish community.
One giant Jewish community, yeah.
America's not like that, but America does have a lot of
No, America is not a Jewish country. This might be better for the Jews in Israel, but it's not a Jewish country. Anyways,
I understand.
yeah.
How is it a gezel? You said it's a hefsed. Is the gezel because other people are and you're benefiting from other people's
Yeah,
money?
but it's huge to a lot of Jewish communities.
That's what I'm understanding. The gezel. You said that gezel is a hefsed.
The Gezel, yeah, because now you're,
The gezel is that a lot of people are paying and then you're benefiting.
a lot of people are paying, you're benefiting from it, and you're not paying for it, yeah.
So now it's at the hefsed.
There are other things, the Rebbe mentions both things. Also, because they're not going, the Rebbe was speaking over there, at the beginning of it, the Rebbe spoke about building a sewer line in Kfar Chabad. That's how the whole discussion came into play about the taxes. Building a sewer line is a tevas everybody, so the Rebbe says that building the proper sewer lines up Halacha, Moisef Tahara, some interesting point over there. Yeah, this is look at the thing. Then all this stuff go out and it's yeah. Anyways, with that we conclude. There's something else I wanted to talk about in this Sa'if, in this Siman, but I guess it'll be next year, tomorrow, Wednesday.